Alright, today we are going to make a minigun. It has a few different features. Some of these features we're just going to overview, kind of walk through the blueprint. And then I also have a little basic player, and we will set up the very basics of kind of the barrel spinning to get that working ourselves. But everything else will just be an overview. And of course you can jump on Discord to get the models for this, and then also the if you have any questions or bugs while following this tutorial. An overview of what this is. I have a few different barrels because the barrels actually will spin at different rates depending on how many barrels you have, since you need to rotate the barrel more per barrel. So I have a 6-barreled one and a 3-barreled one. You can also scroll wheel to adjust the fire rate. It kind of bugs out at that rate, but you can lower the fire rate to be pretty slow actually. So there's like one every half second, which is nice and fun. And then you can also set it to use up ammo. So you notice the shells on the right here. Let me increase this. So you see the shells are going down, and then I only have 2 shells left, and then they get used up. Which I think is a pretty satisfying effect as the ammo kind of gets eaten away. And then there's actually 2 different rotation styles. One is the alignment style. So notice it always tries to kind of line up with where it wants to be. So see, didn't have quite enough speed there. The alignment style isn't perfect, particularly at very fast rates. It kind of just stops. But then the other style is kind of a constant rotation where it always kind of spins a little bit. And then, oh, I need ammo. And then you can still rev it up. It's not at full speed by default. And then with all of these, you can hold down the right mouse button to prep it, so you can fire instantly. And then you have shells and linkages ejecting from the left here. So we're going to go over most of these features, kind of the basic idea of how we set them up. We probably won't cover most of the basic kind of just like normal stuff like muzzle flashes and things. We might like very briefly overview them. So this is the Rotary character. There's still a few ideas. I might install a heat system or some barrel smoke. Some of the particles are cascade particles, and they probably should be Niagara particles. Then I could move this to 5.7 too. This is in 4.26, just because I typically do most of my projects in older versions of Unreal, so you can always migrate it forward since it doesn't migrate backwards very well. Okay. Let me make some more space so these can be seen on the screen easier. So this is just the normal movement. This is actually what I have in the default player here. In terms of begin play, we just create our HUD, and then the event tick is where most of the alignment system is going to kind of live, and the shell movement. And the barrel spinning. This all needs to have at least something on tick. And then the alignment style, there's one that's a constant, and there's another one that's trying to align itself. So in terms of the barrel spin style, the constant barrel spin is actually a lot simpler. You're going to do this event down here, which is calculate spin rate. This is feeding in what do you want the idle spin rate to be. So this is checking if the trigger is pressed or the spin prep. The spin prep is we're only going to briefly kind of go over this stuff since I'm going to reset up some of this in the tutorial player right here. So this trigger system, this is if you press the right mouse button, you can do spin prep, and left mouse button is trigger pressed or not trigger pressed. This is just kind of a basic trigger system. And it's checking, hey, do you have ammo? Or are we even using ammo? And then it will just only fire once the barrel is spun up to the correct speed. So let me move this over here. So notice if I click only a little bit, it will spin up the barrel but won't fire. It has to wait until so there's a little bit of fire delay, unless of course I hold down the right button, then it will be instant. Okay, so that's the trigger system here. This is the barrel spin method. This is basically just checking, is the barrel spun up, and checking if you should check for alignment or just spin the barrel normally, which kind of determines which way the barrel spins. Because when it's checking for alignment, it is checking this right here, and it's like, okay, is the barrel rotated at one of those degrees where the barrel would be aligned? And as soon as it is, then turn off check for alignment and stop spinning the barrel. The barrel spin formula or event is actually pretty simple. It's just spin barrel, and then you're just adding local rotation. You want them to be on the X rotation just because of how Eulers work within Unreal. You can kind of get it to spin on Y, but certain things will break, like this barrel alignment check. And then if you spin on Z, other things will break as well. So X is your best bet in terms of spinning stuff by adding a rotation. And then it's all governed kind of by this alpha, the spin rate, which is just goes from 0 to 1. Okay, fire delay, use ammo count. Let me just expose all my variables. I don't have any functions, hence why everything is just out here. The other thing, I do have a spin noise, which I modulate the pitch. So this is the spin noise right here. This is actually made off of default noises. So it's just light 1, light 2, and steam with some modulators on them. And then they're kind of mixed together to make this spin noise. And you notice it will kind of increase in pitch the faster it spins, or it will decrease in pitch, and then it will get quieter the slower it gets. Not necessarily the slower it gets, but the quietness is modulated based on the spin rate, which is right, which gets modulated through this, the calculate spin rate, which is the alpha for the spin. Okay, this is just kind of how I adjust the RPM. I just have it on my mouse wheel, and I'm just adjusting the fire delay, oops, based on if I scroll up or down, and I have it a maximum of 2 seconds between round, all the way down to 0.01 seconds, which is 6,000 rounds per minute, which is the one where things start bugging out. So you can notice the sound is bugging as well. There's just too many. Okay. This is how to set the ammo. and then the feed system here. Now that we've done kind of an overview, I think I want to set up the tutorial player. So let's go ahead and just set this version of the player into our game mode. So notice we have nothing. We can move around and look, but this is just kind of a basic player with the very basic movement. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab, probably going to pull this over here, and I'm just going to grab my model. All of this will be in my Discord under the assets, but let's grab the Rotary package and put it into the camera. And then I am just going to copy the location, since that I think works pretty well. We'll go under viewport, just like that. It looks a little weird since there's no barrel on it, but that is that. Let's see if it shows up. Yep, there it is. We'll clear this. Oh, I guess you can't clear the material. Maybe we'll make it gold so it looks different. Yeah, that's okay. And then we can, the way these are parented, we can just drag this in. We only need one though, so it doesn't matter which one, since we'll be able to, let's actually use the 3-barreled one, and we'll center this just like that. And notice you can tell it's oriented correctly, since if we adjust the X rotation, it spins, which is what we want. Okay, very good. And then we're going to set up the simple kind of version of this. To start, let's grab just like a trigger system. So we'll do left mouse button, trigger pressed or not pressed, and then we will also do a fire check. And we're not going to put ammo on the other one. So we'll use this. And let's just paste this in here. Do nothing. So we need a trigger pressed event. We need a firing event. This is a very basic trigger system. We will need a spin rate variable. This fire event, we will do custom fire event. So this is where we can hook up, this fire event is where we can hook up everything that should happen when the weapon gets fired. And then this should go back here. And since we don't have the ammo check, we can just slot it right into that. So let's make something happen on the fire event. Right now, this spin rate, let's see this, let's just make this 1. We'll need to reset this, but just so it will actually fire. And then let's hook up just like a sound or something to the fire event. Or you know what I can do? I can just grab this. This is what I do. I have here is a line trace from the camera, and then I am get rid of that 3. I am spawning in this projectile here, which really is just a particle, and then the projectile. I have gravity turned off, and then it creates an impact event, which is a decal that gets attached, and then also an impact particle. I like the ceramic one. It just looks pretty good. It's a good general purpose particle. And then it plays an explosion at wherever it gets hit. So let's see. So I think we have 0 fire delay. So let's set this to something. 0.1 is typically not bad. So there you go, it's shooting. Obviously no barrel spinning, but at least something's happening so we know our trigger is working. Okay. We will add in a sound, I think. Just to the fire. I don't think we'll add a muzzle flash. I think this one works though. So I'm gonna add a sequence so it can still shoot the projectile, but then it will also, once it's done with that, spawn in a muzzle flash and play the fire noise, which is both of these. Which I'll put this right in here, and then we can attach this to the muzzle of this. These are sockets. So I'll show you how these, oops. How these work. Muzzle. So this is the volume multiplier, the pitch multiplier. Same here. Okay. The sockets, if you go into your mesh, you'll see a socket manager. And then you can just create socket and then name it and move it to wherever you want. I'll click one. So you can see this one, this is for where the shells come out. This is for where the links come out. This is for where the motor noise should come from. And this is the muzzle. So there you go. Now let's get to the kind of the meat of things, which is the actual spinning system. We're only going to set up one spinning system. So we are going to set up this system down here, which is the calculate spin rate. And I guess we'll have a spin prep as well. That's not too hard to set up, since that will just be like this on the right mouse button in our example. And this will be trigger. This will be fire. Okay. So we're going to need this, but this doesn't actually do anything, since then we're going to have spin barrels. And then this is really just the spin system here. Calculate spin rate, and then spin barrels. And then all of this needs to go onto tick. So that would be like this. So constant barrel spin will just be on tick like this. Oh, I think we're missing a, yeah, there we go. Barrel count, which is 3. I'm flagging these variables as editable, since these actually you can kind of change before you even play, where these events are kind of things that get used while you're playing. So notice I can spin up the barrel. So this is really the system here. So let me kind of review the final summary of what happens. So we have event tick, which spins the constant barrel spin. This could technically just connect right here, but we'll leave it as a separate event. So in the case where it's more complex, like the first blueprint, you can actually use it. And then this just calculates the spin rate and then spins the barrels at that rate. The rate gets calculated based on if the trigger's pressed or your spin prepped, and it will just blend this to either 1 or something less than 1. This isn't actually the speed, this is like the rate. So the what you could name this is spin rate alpha, because it's kind of blending like the alpha. It acts as an alpha to blend between how fast you actually want to spin it. So this is dependent on the barrel count, and the fire delay determines the actual speed of how fast the barrel should spin when it's at full rotation. And then you can just multiply this by delta seconds so it's frame rate independent, because it's on tick. So if you notice, we can even, just to kind of show that this is working, let's say we wanted this to spin at a lower rate. So by default, it kind of didn't spin quite as fast, so we can half that, so 0.06. So notice it's spinning a lot slower until we start firing. All right, the last thing I think I'll review here is here, spin barrels. The last thing I think I'll review is the chain feed system, which we will jump back to the main blueprint here. So notice this kind of chain feed, this is on a spline. I included the models for this if you also want to set this up. So this has a spline that gets set up in the construction script. So this is very similar to kind of how we set up when doing our treads or our escalator. And it's just getting the spline length, and we're looping through, and we are adding instances to our instanced mesh here. And of course, this can be an instance mesh because it's not like the escalator where it actually needs to move anything. It's purely just like a visual element. And the way we kind of eat this up, so where is it? I think it's this, shell move pulse. There's a tick here, and then the pulse controls basically, let's move 1 shell per time. And then we are getting the instance count, and 1 less, since of course the index starts at 0. And then we are going through and we are just moving them to their next position. However, we are also checking, be like, okay, once you've moved them all, if you have more instances than you have rounds, then remove one of the instances. It is important to note that you kind of have to do it in reverse to make the math easier. So notice the shell offset is, you have to go from the end of the spline to 0 in order to make the math work easier here. Because we're always removing whatever shell is at 0 when we're out of ammo. And that causes, let me grab this rotary character again. Let me go back to, so that causes always the shell closest to the player to get used, so that way you don't see shells disappearing at the end. Let me slow down the speed here. Something like this. There you go, you can really see. Yeah, there you go. Oops. That's kind of cool, but not what I wanted. Is it still okay? And that's how we kind of eat away the shells, is this. We're removing the shells at 0 if there's more shells than ammo. This is already a bit long. Frankly, this became more complex than I thought it would be. Each element is fairly simple. So for example, this is fairly simple. This is fairly simple. Even the spin noise system here is fairly simple, but a minigun like this has a lot of different elements. So that kind of is what every single part that makes it really interesting kind of combined is what adds to the complexity. But if you do want to kind of make your own miniguns, definitely jump on the Discord and ask if you want. I can even kind of copy images of specific elements that you're trying to get working for yourself, or if you're trying to get it working in another version of Unreal and you're running into weird bugs or things look different. I'm pretty good at translating that. I've had a few people do that already for like the tread tutorial and stuff. So definitely hop in there. I like miniguns. I think they're pretty satisfying, even if you have to be like a super soldier to use them. So with that being said, I hope this was somewhat interesting. I haven't seen a lot of info on miniguns or these mechanics in Unreal, so I hope this at least gave you some inspiration and showed something else that can be pretty easily done in this engine. And good luck.